If you grew up anywhere near these mountains, you already know how it is. Folks don't sit around making up stories. They pass down the ones they can't forget. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Kinda crazy when you think about it. All of us sitting in the dark, listening to the same story from different corners of the map. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe so more people can find their way into these woods, even if they probably shouldn't. All right, here we go. I was 4 days into a solo trek through the Blue Ridge Mountains when everything went wrong. The whole point of this trip was silence, a complete reset. My life had been swallowed by screens, notifications, and deadlines. I was tired of pretending that constant noise was normal. I needed something older, quieter, something that didn't care about Wi-Fi signals or battery life. The forest felt like the only honest thing left. I planned it all down to the ounce: food, water, routes, backup routes, and backups for those backups. I wasn't new to this. I'd hiked parts of the Pacific Crest Trail before, spent months off-grid, and thought I understood what solitude really meant. I had my maps, compass, GPS, and all the confidence in the world. The first 3 days were everything I wanted. Open skies that went on forever, whispering trees, and air so clean it felt sharp in my lungs. By the morning of the 4th day, the world felt reduced to the sound of wind and my own boots pressing into the dirt. No phones, no traffic, no human sound. Just me in the woods. It was perfect. That morning, the trail sloped down through a cool, shaded hollow before climbing again, slow and steady. The sunlight broke through in golden shards, and I remember thinking how alive the forest seemed. Buzzing insects, creaking branches, the rhythmic crunch of gravel beneath my steps. Around noon, I spotted something nailed to a tree. At first, I thought it was just another marker, one of those wooden signs pointing hikers north or west. But it was barely readable. The paint had faded to near nothing, the letters eaten by time and storms. It looked like something ancient hikers might have left decades ago. Still, it pointed roughly north, and I followed. That was my first mistake. Another hour went by, and the path began to twist into something different. It narrowed, choked by roots that crawled like veins across the soil. The air turned damp. The smell shifted too. Wet earth, old decay, something metallic hiding beneath it all. I pulled out my GPS. It blinked alive, but showed my little blue dot floating alone in a blank sea of green. No trail, no topography, just emptiness. That's weird, I muttered. But another voice in my head, the stubborn one, snapped back. Trails change, maps get old, people make shortcuts. You know what you're doing. So I kept walking. Mistake number 2. Time blurred. The forest started to warp in ways I couldn't explain. The trees didn't look right anymore, not majestic, just wrong. Their trunks twisted like bones. The bark seemed to have deep scars carved through it. Some had swollen lumps bulging out in shapes that looked disturbingly human. And the roots, God, the roots looked like they were reaching, curling out of the ground like fingers searching for something just beneath the surface. Then I saw it. A strip of fabric tied around a tree trunk ahead. My heart lifted for a second. A marker, I thought. Civilization. But when I got closer, I realized it wasn't any official color. It wasn't bright orange or blue. It was pale, sun-bleached, almost white. Frayed at the edges like it had been there for decades. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but I slowed down anyway. That's when I started noticing more of them. Little things. Bits of rope tied around branches, some frayed, some knotted tight. Another piece of fabric, this one with a reddish stain at one end. Then something worse. A rusted chain looped low around a trunk, still locked in a perfect circle like it used to hold something. My stomach turned over. The sensible part of my brain finally whispered, "Turn around." And for once I listened. I turned back, retracing what I thought were my own steps. But the forest didn't match what I remembered. The trees were closer together, their branches knitting overhead like a ceiling. I looked for the first fabric strip. It was gone. The rope was gone. The chain, too. The air itself felt thicker, pressing against my skin. The path under my boots had changed texture, soft and wet, like walking on a soaked sponge. Each step made a faint squelch. Then I saw them. Footprints, bare feet, small, deep enough to show toes splayed wide apart, like they were gripping the mud for balance. They led off the path and disappeared into the undergrowth. I froze. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe a child from a nearby cabin, maybe someone bathing in a creek. But there was no water around here, no houses, no human anything for miles. I hadn't seen a soul since the ranger station 2 days back. I kept walking anyway, eyes forward. Don't think, just move. That's when I heard it, soft, behind me. A sound like something being pulled out of wet earth. That slow, sucking schluck noise. Once, then again. I stopped breathing. My heart thudded so hard it made my vision pulse. The sound came again. One step, then another. Wet. Careful. Coming closer. I spun around so fast my trekking poles clattered to the ground. Nothing. Just the forest. Trees damp with moss, branches glistening. I told myself it was the mud settling, that the rain from last night was making the earth shift. I even said it out loud to hear my own voice. You're just hearing things. I started walking faster, then faster still. Every few steps, I looked back. Nothing. Then I looked down again. The footprints were back, only this time they were ahead of me. Same size, same shape. Bare, small feet pressing into the mud, fresh. Leading in the exact direction I was going. Cold shot through my stomach like a spike of ice. My brain screamed to stop, to turn around, but the idea of standing still felt worse. So I followed. I don't know why. Fear makes people stupid. The prints led to something pale, half buried in the mud near a tree. I thought it was another strip of fabric. But when I got closer, I saw fingers. A hand. Small, grayish white, reaching out of the ground like it had been trying to crawl free. I went completely still. I blinked, looked again, and it was gone. The mud was smooth, unbroken, as if it had never been there. That broke something inside me. I ran. I didn't care where. I just ran. Branches clawed at my jacket. Thorns sliced my legs. Mud sucked at my boots with every step. I didn't stop until my lungs were on fire, and I slammed into a tree trunk hard enough to knock the breath out of me. I looked around, gasping, trying to remember which way I'd come. That's when I saw them again. Footprints. Small, bare, leading straight toward me. Then came the voice. Soft, flat, like it wasn't coming from a throat, but from the air itself. Don't leave me here. My skin went ice cold. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded sad, pleading, but it still froze my blood. I didn't even think. I bolted again, crashing through brush until my pack split open and spilled half my gear behind me. I didn't stop to pick it up. I just ran until, through the blur of branches and panic, I saw salvation. A blaze. Bright orange paint slashed across tree bark. An official trail marker. Real. Solid. I nearly cried. I followed it, stumbling, bleeding, filthy, until I hit a wider trail, the one I'd started on that morning. The sun was dipping low, painting the woods in long red shadows. I don't even remember setting up camp that night. I must have. My tent was up when I woke, but I have no memory of doing it. All I remember is sitting there in the dark, staring at the tree line. I didn't sleep. Every time I blinked, I thought I saw movement between the trees, something pale, small, swaying gently as if watching. When dawn came, I packed what was left of my gear and left the mountains without looking back. Later, I checked the maps again. I traced every step, every possible deviation. There was no old trail where I'd gone off, no forgotten route, just blank space, solid forest. I reported it to a ranger on my way out. He listened quietly, nodding. When I finished, he said, "You're lucky you found your way back. Folks get turned around easy out there." I told him about the footprints, the voice, the hand. His eyes flicked toward the woods. "Best to forget that part," he said softly. "The forest likes to keep its own." I left without another word. Months passed before I could talk about it again. Even now, I hear that voice sometimes when I'm alone. Not a dream, not an echo, just those same words whispering faint and cold. "Don't leave me here." Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still smell the mud. And sometimes, when it rains, I swear I see small, bare footprints in the puddles outside my window, leading away from the forest, toward me. I began my hike before dawn, the way you do when you crave the kind of silence that only the wilderness can offer. The Great Smoky Mountains, that mysterious stretch of the southern Appalachians, had always pulled at me with their mist and their mood. They demand patience, humility, a kind of reverence that makes you feel small and temporary. I liked that. I needed it. My pack was light. 3 liters of water, 2 protein bars, a first aid kit, and a map so worn it felt more like soft cloth than paper. My plan was simple. Hike 6 miles in, reach the ridge by midday, eat lunch with a view, and be back at my car before dark. Nothing heroic, nothing reckless, just me and the trail. The first few hours were perfect. This was why I came. The trail markers were easy to spot, bright white slashes painted on tree trunks, so fresh they might as well have been neon signs. The path wound upward in switchbacks, gentle but steady, and the air smelled like rain-soaked earth, that clean metallic scent that sticks in your throat. The ground still held moisture from the night before. Every step had a soft give, like walking on a sponge. I passed 2 groups of campers before noon. We exchanged the quick, polite nods hikers give each other, acknowledgement without invitation. I didn't come here for conversation. I came for quiet. The kind of quiet that gets so deep, it becomes a sound in itself. A low hum that makes you hear your own heartbeat. By midday, I stopped near a narrow stream that sliced through the trail, catching sunlight in little flashes. It wasn't supposed to be there. According to my map, the next water source was a good 1.5 miles down the other side of the valley. I unfolded the paper and squinted at it, trying to make the terrain lines rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Nothing matched. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe the rainfall had been heavy. Maybe a temporary runoff had formed. Nature does that. It changes without warning. So I shrugged, took a sip of water, and kept going. The trail stayed close to the stream, hugging it like an old friend, and I figured fine, it would split off soon enough. But it didn't. It curved and twisted through the woods, deeper and darker, the sound of running water, a constant companion. The ground still looked worn, the dirt tamped down as though other hikers had passed this way. So I followed it without question. But the longer I walked, the more something inside me began to tighten. It was subtle at first, The slope of the ground didn't match the map. The air felt cooler, the light dimmer. It hit me only when I realized I hadn't seen a single trail marker in quite a while. I stopped, turned in a slow circle, scanning tree trunks for a flash of white paint. Nothing. Every tree looked the same. That shouldn't have scared me, but it did. Trail markers fade, fall off, or get repainted in different colors sometimes. It happens. But this felt wrong. There was a sudden absence of pattern, like the forest had rearranged itself when I wasn't looking. I decided to turn back, always the best move when the map stops matching reality. Except when I did. The trail behind me didn't look like the one I'd come from. The ground was covered in thicker leaves, the trees more crowded. It was as if the woods had swallowed my footprints. I pulled out my compass. North was still north. That was something. I took a breath and picked a direction that should have led me back toward the main trail. After maybe 15 minutes, I froze. The stream was in front of me again. Only now it was wider, angrier. The water gushed fast, slamming against its banks like something alive. That made no sense. I'd been walking directly away from it. I just stared at it, waiting for my brain to untangle what I was seeing. It didn't. I crouched to study the soil near the water's edge. It was soft, uneven, and sunken in places, like something heavy had pressed into it repeatedly. But they weren't footprints, not really. They were round, deep, and warped, like the ground had melted and then refrozen in strange shapes. Pockets of water filled each depression, and when I leaned closer, I could see faint ripples moving inside them, though there was no breeze. My stomach turned. I took out my phone, knowing what I'd find. No signal. I checked twice anyway. Nothing. I looked at my compass again. The needle jittered, twitching back and forth like it was shivering. That was new. That's when the calm, rational part of my mind started to break. I told myself to focus. Follow the stream, I thought. Water leads somewhere. Roads, cabins, civilization. Always follow the water. So I did. I walked for what felt like an hour, though when I later checked my watch, only 20 minutes had passed. That's when I saw it. Something hanging from a low branch ahead, pale against the dark bark. Fabric, maybe. Torn, fluttering slightly. Relief flickered for a second. Maybe another hiker had lost something. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. When I got closer, my relief died in my throat. It wasn't fabric. It was skin. Dried, yellowed, curling at the edges like parchment. It hung from the branch in thin strips, swaying gently, the breeze making a faint whispering sound as it moved. I stopped several feet away, my body locked before my brain even processed the horror. I stared too long, trying to rationalize it. An animal? Some kind of shed skin? But it was too large, too human. My instincts screamed to move. I didn't touch it. I didn't even breathe near it. I just kept walking, faster now, my boots crunching against the leaves loud enough to sound wrong. That's when I noticed the silence. Not quiet. The absence of everything. No birds, no wind, no buzzing flies, nothing. It felt like the world had been unplugged. The forest was holding its breath. I told myself fear was tricking me. Adrenaline does that. Makes you imagine things. But then, through the stillness, I saw the clearing. There was something built in the center of it. A structure, about 10 feet tall, crude but deliberate, made of branches lashed together with something dark and sinewy. I didn't want to know what that binding was. Bones hung from the crossbeams, small and pale, clean enough to gleam in the dim light. When the wind stirred, they clicked together softly, a hollow music that crawled under my skin. It wasn't random. Someone, or something, had made it. I didn't move closer. I didn't have to. The message was clear. I wasn't supposed to be here. I turned and ran. I didn't think. I didn't care where I was going. My boots slipped on the wet ground. Branches clawed at my arms. My breath came in ragged bursts. When I finally stopped, bent over and gasping, I heard it again. The stream. It was impossible. It was ahead of me now, cutting across my path like it had been waiting for me. The water churned violently, the color of rust and shadow. Something moved in it. Not fish, not debris. Something long, pale, jointed, sliding beneath the surface like a spine. It twisted once, and I saw the glint of something bone-white before it disappeared again. That was it. That broke me. I dropped half my gear to run lighter, my map, my food, even my jacket. I scrambled uphill, downhill in any direction that looked open. The compass needle spun in circles, useless. The map might as well have been blank. The forest seemed to shift every time I blinked. The trees grew denser, their trunks leaning inward as if conspiring to close me in. The light dimmed to a sickly gray. The air smelled wrong, wet metal and something old, something dead. I kept running until the ground beneath my boots changed. Gravel, hard and sharp. I stumbled, nearly fell, then realized what it meant. I was back on a path, a real one. Ahead, a sign nailed to a post. No access beyond this point. Past the sign, the forest looked exactly the same. Behind me, the trail stretched clean and perfect, like it had always been there. I stood there shaking, my breath coming in broken gasps, and for the first time in hours, I heard something that didn't belong to the woods. Distant traffic, faint but real. Civilization. I walked fast. Half a mile later, the parking lot came into view, and my car sat there like a miracle. I don't remember getting in, only the sound of the door slamming shut. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I drove until my phone finally lit up with a signal. Then I kept driving, 50 miles, maybe more, before I dared to stop. That night, in a cheap roadside motel, I emptied what was left of my pack. My compass lay on the bed, the needle twitching faintly even now, though there was no metal nearby. My map was gone, along with most of my food. But at the very bottom of the pack, something new had appeared. A strip of pale, curling material, paper thin and dry. It looked like skin. I threw it in the trash and left before sunrise. I've never gone back to the Smokies. I've never even hiked alone again. But sometimes, when it rains, I swear I can smell that same damp, metallic air seeping through my windows. And once, just once, I woke in the middle of the night to hear the faint clicking of something bone against bone, coming from the woods behind my house. By the time my boots sank into the mud at the second overlook, my legs were already burning and my nerves were starting to hum. The plan had been simple. A 5-mile loop through the Cumberland Plateau, easy terrain, steady views, nothing more than a casual fall hike before winter started rolling in. The air was supposed to be crisp, the leaves still hanging on in their orange and gold last breaths. Wes was the one who came up with it. He'd texted us earlier that week, promising an easy day, a chance to catch up, stretch our legs, and be back at the car before sunset. "Trust me," he'd said. It was always trust me with him. And somehow, that phrase was where everything started to go wrong. It was me, Wes, Johnny, and Colton, the same group that had been together since middle school. The kind of lifelong friends who only keep the bond alive through these random weekend adventures. None of us were serious hikers, but we'd done enough trails to feel like we knew what we were doing. This was supposed to be another easy day. No cliffs, no climbs, just a little exercise and a few photos before the cold set in. The gravel parking lot at the trailhead looked safe enough when we got there. A handful of cars, people unloading packs, a family with kids chasing each other in circles, a couple with a golden retriever. Everything about it screamed tourist-friendly. I remember thinking that was a good sign. Too many people for anything to go wrong. We walked to the wooden board with the big color-coded map nailed to it, showing the loop and nearby trails. Before I could even find our route, Wes grinned, that same grin he always had before we did something stupid. "Found a shortcut," he said, tapping the map like he'd discovered buried treasure. "A shortcut to what?" I asked. "Better view, less crowded. It cuts through the main loop, saves us time. Trust me." I glanced at Johnny, whose raised eyebrows said everything I was thinking. But before either of us could say no, Colton just laughed. What's the worst that could happen? That was Colton, loud, fearless, the kind of guy who couldn't stand being the cautious one. So of course, we followed. Because that's what you do when your friends decide something dumb sounds like an adventure. The first stretch wasn't bad at all. The main path was wide, hard-packed from years of use. Trail markers flashed bright yellow on tree trunks every few feet. We passed a couple of hikers with trekking poles, an older couple snapping pictures of mushrooms, and one guy wrangling 2 dogs the size of small bears. It all felt safe, almost boring. Then Wes pointed to a thin track that broke away from the main trail to the right, a line of flattened leaves cutting between the trees. No sign, no markers, just a faint indentation in the dirt. "That's the one," Wes said confidently. "You're serious?" Johnny asked, already sounding like he regretted coming. "It'll loop back," Wes said, like he'd been here a dozen times. "Look, other people have used it." He pointed to a few faint boot prints, half covered in leaves. I hesitated, but Colton just grinned and stepped off the main path. "Come on, adventure time." So we followed. At first, it was fine. The trail narrowed but was easy enough to walk. The air was cool. The light filtering through the trees made everything feel golden. For about half an hour, it was peaceful. The kind of silence you only find in the woods, deep and honest. But gradually, the slope got steeper. Rocks appeared beneath the leaves, slick with moisture. The trail curved sharply downward, and I could feel my calves start to protest. "Wes," I said after a while, "are you sure this thing loops back?" He didn't answer right away. "Almost there," he said finally, but his tone wasn't as sure as before. We didn't turn around. None of us wanted to be the one to kill the vibe. That's how it always works in groups. No one wants to admit they're scared first. By the time the sun started dropping, the air had shifted. Shadows stretched long, and the light went from warm to cold in what felt like minutes. My phone was useless. No signal bars, no GPS. Johnny's and Colton's were the same. "Okay," Wes said, breathing hard. "Maybe I was a little off on the distance, but it's fine. We'll hit the main trail before dark." The problem was, there was no trail anymore. Just a faint suggestion beneath layers of wet leaves. My thighs ached. My throat felt raw. I stopped to drink, and that's when I noticed it, the silence. Not the kind that's peaceful, but the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. No birds, no rustling leaves, not even the buzz of insects. Just us, our breathing, and the sound of our boots in the dirt. "Seriously," I said, "what if this doesn't loop back?" "It does," Wes said, but his voice was low now, hesitant. Then, as if on cue, something caught my eye through the trees. Down a small slope, maybe 30 yards away, stood a cabin, half hidden behind bare branches, like it had been waiting for us to notice it. The wood was dark and soft-looking, eaten away in places. Moss climbed halfway up the roof, and the windows were gray with grime. There was no path leading to it. It was just there. "What the hell is that doing out here?" Johnny asked. "Maybe someone lives there," Colton said. "We could ask for directions." "Or we could not," Johnny muttered. "Because this is literally how every horror movie starts." Colton laughed like that made it better. I didn't. My stomach had twisted tight, the way it does right before you realize you've made a mistake. But when Colton started down the slope, we followed. Because again, that's what you do when your friends make bad decisions together. The porch creaked under our boots. A single chair sat by the door, empty but facing the woods, as if someone had been watching. We knocked. Nothing. The windows were too fogged to see through. "Forget it," I said. "Let's go." We turned to climb back up the slope, and that's when I heard him. "If you're lost," a voice said behind us, "I can show you out." It wasn't loud, just close. Too close. I spun so fast I almost slipped. A man stood just a few feet away, tall and thin. His flannel shirt looked older than any of us, and his jeans were stiff with dirt. His gray hair was uneven, like it had been growing wild for years. But it was his smile that froze me. It was wrong. Too wide, too practiced, like he'd learned it from a picture instead of a face. "We're fine," Wes said quickly, stepping forward. "We'll figure it out." The man tilted his head, that stiff smile still pinned to his face. "No, you won't. Not this far in." He took one slow step toward us. "I'll get you home," he said, "but you have to come inside first." That word, inside, hit something in me. My stomach dropped. "No, really," I said, trying to sound calm. "We're good." His smile twitched, then vanished like someone had cut the strings holding it up. His eyes went flat, empty. "You sure about that?" he asked softly. None of us answered. We just moved. Fast, not running yet, but close. Our boots scraped loud against the leaves as we climbed. The moment we hit the faint trace of trail again, we broke into a run. Behind us, footsteps followed. Slow at first, then faster. I looked back once, and there he was. Walking, not running, but closing the distance anyway, like the space between us didn't matter. "You'll get turned around," he called out, voice calm but louder now. "You won't make it without me." That was enough. We ran harder. Branches tore at my jacket, roots grabbed at my ankles, my lungs burned. But I didn't stop. None of us did. I could still hear him behind us, those steady, deliberate footsteps keeping pace no matter how fast we moved. When we finally stumbled onto a wide, real trail, the sky was almost gone, bleeding orange into black. Up ahead, headlights flickered through the trees. A jeep, 2 hikers inside. We screamed and waved until they slammed the brakes. They didn't ask questions. They didn't have to. We piled into the back, gasping, shaking, covered in mud. I slammed the door shut and looked out the window, half expecting to see him standing at the tree line. But there was nothing. Just the woods, dark and still. We didn't speak on the ride back, not one word. Later, after I'd gotten home, I looked up the area on a map. There was no cabin marked anywhere within 5 miles of that loop. Not even an old homestead. Just forest. And yet, sometimes, when I think about that voice, how calm it was. I swear I can still hear it, just under the sound of wind, whispering, "You won't make it without me." I'm 33 now, but last spring feels like it's still clinging to me, like something I carried out of those woods, never really let go. I decided to spend a quiet weekend hiking a stretch of the Allegheny Mountains, nothing dramatic, just a quick solo trip to clear my head. 2 days out, one night in a backcountry shelter. I'd done plenty of solo hikes before, and this route was supposed to be beginner-friendly, easy even. A place for people who wanted peace, not adventure. That's what I told myself anyway. I got an early start that Saturday, parked my car in a small gravel lot off a back road, and hoisted my pack onto my shoulders. I'd packed light: sleeping bag, tarp, food, water filter, flashlight, and a small knife clipped to my belt just to feel responsible. The morning air was cool, dry. The trail dust clung to my boots as I started, and for a while everything was exactly what I'd hoped for. A couple of older hikers passed me heading back toward the lot, all smiles and small talk. "Beautiful day for it," one said. "You too," I answered, and they disappeared down the trail. After that, I didn't see another soul. By noon, the silence started to hit me. I mean, really hit me. It wasn't the peaceful kind you come out here for. It was a heavy, thick quiet that pressed against your ears. No birds, no rustle of small animals, no wind through the leaves. Just the faint drag of my boots on the dirt. I told myself it was fine. Spring was early. Maybe the forest hadn't quite woken up yet. Still, it bothered me enough to notice. A few hours later, I reached a ridge where the path split in two. One side followed the official route toward the backcountry shelter I'd planned to camp at. The other sloped gently downhill, unmarked but strangely well worn. The dirt was packed down, the brush trampled. I hesitated. The logical part of me said to stay on the marked path, but curiosity nudged harder. Maybe it led to a view or a creek, something worth seeing. I decided to check it out for 5 minutes, 10 at most. The new path narrowed quickly, snaking between twisted trees whose branches knit together overhead, dimming the light. The ground dipped and curved before flattening into a small clearing. I stopped there, pulled out my map, and frowned. Nothing. The paper showed only a solid stretch of green where I was standing. No side trail, no clearing, just forest. I turned to go back the way I came, and my stomach dropped. The trail behind me didn't look the same. It was choked with brush, thinner, darker. My boot prints were gone. Not one. I told myself it was fine. Maybe I'd turned at an angle and was facing the wrong direction. I started walking the way I thought I'd come, checking my compass just to be safe. North was still north, so I kept going. But every few steps, a creeping doubt slithered deeper. The ground looked untouched, hard and smooth, like no one had walked here in years. The air had gone stale, heavy with the scent of damp wood and old leaves. I pulled out my GPS. No signal. I checked again, moved a few feet, tried again. Still nothing. I wasn't panicking yet, but my pulse had started to quicken. I decided to keep walking until something, anything, looked familiar. That's when I saw it. A footprint. It wasn't mine. It was huge, larger than my boot by several inches, sunk deep into the soft soil like whoever or whatever made it was carrying weight. The edges were clean, sharp, fresh. Another one followed, a few feet ahead. Then another. They led in the same direction I was already heading. I didn't like the idea of following someone this far off trail, but at least it meant I wasn't alone. Maybe another hiker had wandered this way and found the main trail again. Maybe. So I followed. The print stayed steady for a while, then began to change. Subtle at first. The tread faded. The heel marks softened. Then the shape widened, flattened. The toes appeared, long and spread too far apart, like whoever left them wasn't wearing boots anymore. The arches vanished completely. Human, but not right. I slowed down without meaning to. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then I heard it. Snap. A sharp crack echoed from behind me, like a heavy branch breaking under weight. I froze and turned. Nothing. No movement. "Deer," I whispered to myself, voice too thin. "It's just a deer." I started walking faster, scanning the shadows. That's when I heard it again. A dull thud. Then another. Slow, rhythmic, like footsteps, matching my pace somewhere just beyond the tree line. I didn't run. Not yet. But everything in me screamed to. I kept my eyes forward, locked on those warped footprints ahead, and quickened my pace. The sound stayed with me. A steady rhythm, deliberate, unhurried, but too close. After what felt like forever, the trees began to thin, and I saw something through the gaps that made my knees nearly buckle. A shelter. A real, three-walled wooden structure, open on one side, with a slanted roof and a bench built into the back wall. It looked exactly like one of the official trail shelters, except there weren't supposed to be any here. Relief flooded me anyway. I ran the last few yards, ducked inside, and dropped my pack. My hands shook as I fumbled with the emergency radio bolted to the wall. I pressed the call button and shouted for help, giving the last coordinates I could remember. Static hissed, then a faint voice broke through. "Stay put," it said. "We're sending someone." The signal faded in and out, but it was enough. I turned and yanked the heavy wooden shutter down over the open side of the shelter. It slammed shut with a dull thud. I slid the bolt across and sank against the wall, gripping that radio like a weapon. The dark pressed close around me. The air inside was stale, damp. My breathing sounded too loud, like it belonged to someone else. Sweat trickled down my back. I listened, straining for any noise outside, but there was only silence, and the blood pounding in my ears. Then the footsteps came back, slow, heavy, deliberate. Crunch, pause, crunch, coming closer. My throat locked. I counted them in my head without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4, until they stopped right outside the shutter. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The quiet stretched on, endless. Then the steps started again, circling the shelter. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow arcs, like whoever was out there wanted me to know they weren't leaving. Something pressed against the wall. Wood creaked under the weight. The pressure stayed, testing. My chest tightened until I thought my ribs would crack. Then the sound moved to the shutter, right in front of me. The wood felt too thin, too weak. I didn't dare shift or even inhale. My muscles trembled from holding still. And then, a voice. Low, calm, too close. "You're off the trail." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, spoken in a tone almost polite. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. I didn't answer. I didn't blink. Silence. Then, just breathing. Slow, steady, inches from the wood. I could hear it drag in and out like something savoring the air between us. Then it was gone. The steps faded into the trees. I didn't move for hours. Every creak, every brush of wind made me flinch. When the first gray light leaked through the cracks around the shutter, I finally dared to breathe. The rangers showed up around mid-morning. They said my call had barely gone through, half static, half garbled words. But they'd managed to trace it. They unbolted the shutter and helped me outside. I must have looked like hell because one of them kept asking if I was hurt. I wasn't, not physically. The clearing was empty, silent again. nothing but trees and damp ground. But then one of the rangers stopped mid-step, crouched down, and gestured for me to look. About 10 yards from the shelter, the ground was torn up with footprints. Bare ones, huge, deep, leading straight back into the woods. I stared at them until they disappeared into the trees. Then I turned away. I didn't look back once. Later, the rangers told me there weren't any official shelters marked in that area. None for miles. They said I must have found an old one from before the route was rerouted years ago. But I checked the maps later. Every version, even the historical ones, nothing ever existed there. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear that voice. Soft, close, polite, saying, "You're off the trail." The trailhead was barely there. Just a thin, pale scar of dirt slicing off from the edge of the main road. If I hadn't been looking for it, I would have driven right past without ever noticing. I eased my old Jeep into the gravel turnout, cut the engine, and sat for a minute, staring out through the windshield at a wall of trees that looked endless. Dense, dark, unmoving. Beyond those trees stretched the Blue Ridge Mountains, rolling for miles in quiet folds of shadow and light. No houses, no distant hum of cars, not even a power line cutting the horizon. Just space. And that was exactly what I wanted. I needed quiet. 2 days of it. 2 days to turn my phone off, shake the noise out of my head, and let the world shrink down to nothing but my boots and the trail. People pay therapists for that kind of peace. I figured I could just hike it. Everyone in town had said the same thing when I mentioned where I was going: stick to the main trails. They said it with the same tone, like reading from a script. I smiled, nodded, promised I would. But I'd already decided I wasn't sticking to anything marked or paved or full of people taking family selfies. I didn't drive all this way for that. I wanted real wilderness, something old, something that hadn't seen too many human footprints. I grabbed my pack from the passenger seat, heavier now than it felt when I packed it in the motel room that morning. That's always how it goes. Water, food, tent, gear. By mile 3, it'll all feel like it's made of bricks. I locked the Jeep, adjusted the straps, and stepped off the road into the dirt path that was barely a trail. Calling it that was generous. It looked more like the memory of a trail, narrow and half swallowed by undergrowth. The only reason I knew it existed was because of a buried post I found on a hiking forum at 2 a.m, a half-forgotten thread about an old maintenance route that supposedly hadn't been used since the 1970s. The guy who wrote it swore it was there, hidden but walkable. That sounded perfect. The first few miles went easy. The air was sharp with early spring chill, every breath coming out as pale fog. The ground was soft beneath layers of fallen leaves, the incline gentle, almost polite. Around noon, I passed what looked like the last official trail marker, an old wooden post nailed into a tree, the paint flaking and faded to nothing. After that, there was nothing but my compass, the GPS on my phone, and instinct. I didn't see another soul for hours. No hikers, no hunters, not even a bird after a while. Just trees, rows and rows of them stretching into the gray-blue distance. The kind of silence that doesn't stay peaceful for long, the kind that starts to feel like it's waiting for something. I tried to hum some old commercial jingle that came out of nowhere, just to make a sound. The trail split around mid-afternoon, not like a neat fork, but like someone had started cutting a new path and quit halfway through. 2 faint lines veered in different directions. I crouched to check the ground. The left side looked slightly more worn, like maybe it had seen boots once in the last decade. I took that one. I was about 50 yards in when I noticed the coffee cup. It sat right there in the leaves, upright, rust eating at its rim but not ancient. Still solid, still holding its shape. I crouched and picked it up. It was plain metal, no logo, no initials, nothing. Just a little dirty inside. My first thought was cool, old camping trash. My second thought came a heartbeat later. Why is it sitting upright like somebody put it there? I set it down carefully and kept moving, pretending it didn't matter. It was just junk. But a few minutes later, I saw something else. A boot print. Fresh, sharp-edged, still dark and damp like it had just been pressed into the soil. I crouched, set my boot beside it. Whoever made it had feet bigger and wider than mine. A hunter, maybe. I told myself that's what it was. Except the tread pointed backward, toward the direction I'd come from. That detail sat heavy in my head. I picked up my pace. By late afternoon, the trail was gone completely. My GPS dot still floated along a faint gray line, but the world around me looked nothing like the map. I pushed forward anyway until I found a clearing barely wide enough for a small tent. I dropped my pack and set up camp. The quiet by then wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick, the kind that presses against your skin. I told myself that was the point. I came for quiet, right? I boiled water, ate, stashed my food far from the tent, zipped up and lay in the dark, listening to nothing. Hours later, I woke up fast, heart pounding like I'd been running. No dream, no sound, just awake and wired. The air was freezing, and outside the tent was pitch black. Not dark, black. The kind of black where even your own hand would vanish in front of your face. Then I heard it. Soft. Too soft. Like a fingertip dragging slowly across the nylon wall of the tent. My mouth went dry. I held my breath, waited. Silence. No crunch of leaves, no footsteps. Just the faintest sound of fabric whispering. I reached for my headlamp, unzipped the tent an inch, and flicked the light outside. The beam cut through the dark, revealing the pale skeleton of trees. Nothing moved. I turned slowly, scanning. Still nothing. I zipped the tent shut again and lay there, staring into the dark, every nerve wide awake. I didn't sleep another second. When the first gray smear of light hit the trees, I was already packing. My hands shook as I shoved everything into my bag. The granola bar I forced down tasted like dirt, but I didn't care. Daylight made it better. It had to. I was halfway down the mountain when I saw it. Another boot print. Same size, same tread. But this time there were two, side by side. One was the print I'd seen yesterday. The second one hadn't been there before. The dirt had dried overnight. But the new print was still wet around the edges. Fresh. Someone had followed me. I kept walking, trying to look calm, but every step felt too loud. Every few feet I glanced over my shoulder. The trees looked different now, rearranged somehow. Fallen birch across the path. I didn't remember that. Twin rocks to my right, no memory of those either. Even the air felt wrong. That's when I saw the tree, my name carved into the bark. Liam. The letters were deep, clean, fresh. The wood underneath was raw and bright against the dark trunk, sap bleeding from the grooves. I just stood there, staring, brain scrambling for an answer that didn't exist. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe someone else shared my name. No, it was too fresh, too deliberate, and nobody out here should have known who I was. I don't remember dropping my pack, but I did. Left it right there on the trail and ran. Branches clawed my arms. Thorns ripped my jacket. I didn't care. The GPS bounced in my hand, the battery blinking red. My blue dot spun uselessly on the map every time I stumbled. None of it mattered. I just ran. Roots grabbed at my boots, my lungs burned, my legs felt like lead. Still, I didn't stop until the path spat me out at a narrow creek I swear wasn't there yesterday. The water trickled faintly, and on the opposite bank stood another tree. My name again, this time carved deeper, larger. Splinters curled like ribs around the letters. I didn't cross. I turned uphill instead, tearing through the brush, leaving my bearings and the map behind. I didn't care about directions anymore. I just wanted out. My ears strained for sound, for any sound, birds, wind, even insects. Nothing. The silence was absolute. Only my own ragged breathing filled the air. Somehow, that was worse than hearing footsteps. I don't know how long I ran before I saw the glint of metal ahead. For a second, my brain refused to believe it. Then I broke through the last of the trees and saw my Jeep sitting exactly where I'd left it. The same gravel pull-off. The same silence. Relief crashed over me, then twisted into something colder. Something was on the windshield. A strip of birch bark, edges curling, pale and thin. My name carved into it. Liam. I ripped it off and hurled it into the woods, heart slamming so hard it hurt. I jumped into the Jeep, jammed the key in, and turned it over. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as I tore back onto the road. I didn't stop until I hit pavement and saw houses and power lines again. Proof the world was still real. I told myself later it was a prank. Someone messing with hikers, that's all. That's what I keep telling myself. But sometimes, late at night, when I drive home from work and the road cuts past the tree line, I think I see movement just beyond the beams of my headlights. Not fast, not close. Just the faint shimmer of something pale slipping between the trunks. And once, weeks later, I found another strip of birch bark tucked beneath my wiper blade. The edges curling, the letters carved deep. Liam, come back. A friend of mine, Ethan, once told me about a stretch of the Blue Ridge Parkway Trail, one of those less traveled routes winding through the quieter folds of the Appalachians. He said it wasn't as crowded as the popular ones, that it ran long and smooth for miles, where you could walk for hours without seeing another soul. The idea of that. No noise, no people, just space. Stuck with me for months. By early autumn, I finally decided to do it. Just 3 days. Nothing ambitious. A short solo trip to reset my head and shake off the static of city life. I planned it carefully. Tent, sleeping bag, decent boots, a small stove, water filter, and more food than I'd ever realistically need. I even packed an extra power bank because I liked pretending I was responsible. I downloaded offline maps, printed backups, double-checked my compass, and studied the terrain until I could have drawn it from memory. I imagined it as one of those wholesome wilderness resets people brag about online. Simple, rugged, quiet. Just me and the trail. The first day couldn't have been better. I parked my car in a half-empty dirt lot, hoisted my pack onto my shoulders, and hit the path a little after sunrise. The air was crisp enough to sting my nose, and my breath came out in white puffs that disappeared into the morning mist. The first few hours passed in that meditative rhythm hiking gives you. The crunch of dirt, the sway of branches, the easy pattern of steps and breath. I passed 2 groups of hikers heading the opposite way. We exchanged polite trail talk, but once they faded behind me, it was just me in the woods. By the time I found a clearing big enough for my tent, I'd gone almost 9 miles. The spot was perfect, flat, ringed by thin trees, quiet except for the distant hum of wind through the canopy. I set up camp, cooked a quick meal, and fell asleep almost instantly. That night was dreamless, black and still. the kind of sleep I hadn't had in years. The next morning started the same, clear, calm, and bright. I ate a protein bar for breakfast and packed up, feeling stupidly proud of myself for how well things were going. I wasn't lost, I wasn't tired, I wasn't one of those people who made the news for getting stranded after mile 2. I was, for once, doing something right. Around mid-morning, I reached a fork in the trail. One path looked clean, well-worn, easy to follow. The other was half-eaten by brush, like the forest was slowly swallowing it back up. My map didn't show any split. Still, the obvious choice was obvious. The clean path had to be the main one. So I took it. 2 hours later, the unease began. I hadn't seen a single blaze marker since I took that turn. If you've ever hiked along one of the official Appalachian routes, you know how strange that is. Those little white rectangles on the trees are constant, comforting. You start to take them for granted. But I hadn't seen one in miles. I pulled out my map. Nothing about a fork anywhere near where I thought I was. Then I tried my phone. My signal was weak, one flickering bar clinging to life. The GPS showed my blue dot spinning uselessly in a patch of green. I waited, hoping it would stabilize, but it didn't. Within minutes, the signal was gone completely. That was when I decided to turn back, or at least I thought I did. I followed what I believed was the same trail, retracing my steps. After maybe an hour, I realized nothing looked familiar. The incline was wrong. The trees didn't match. Every landmark I thought I'd pass again simply wasn't there. I told myself I was overreacting. People get turned around, it happens. But the longer I walked, the heavier that feeling got. The one that starts low in your stomach and spreads like cold water. The one that tells you something is wrong long before your brain catches up. By the time I admitted I was lost, my phone was a useless brick. No bars, no GPS. Just that tiny, mocking, no service icon. I decided to keep walking. If I was lost, I figured I'd run into the main trail eventually. That confidence lasted maybe 3 hours. The forest around me began to change, not dramatically, but in small, unsettling ways. The light dimmed faster than it should have, the shadows stretching long and strange. The trees grew closer together. Every sound I made, my footsteps, my breathing, seemed too loud, bouncing back at me from all sides. When I finally stopped to make camp, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I had to. My legs ached, my hands were shaking, and the thought of walking in the dark was worse than stopping. I found a relatively flat patch between 3 big trees, dropped my pack, and set up the tent. My hands didn't feel steady. Dinner was another protein bar I barely tasted. I told myself that people got lost all the time, that I'd backtrack in the morning, find the right path, and laugh about it later. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up. There was no noise, no dream that had pulled me awake. I just opened my eyes and knew I wasn't alone. My heartbeat was so loud, it filled the space around me. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They weren't close, but they weren't far either. I could hear the weight in them, the soft crunch of leaves under something heavy. Not a deer, not a squirrel, something walking upright. I didn't move. I didn't unzip the tent. I just lay there, frozen, listening. The steps circled, not fast, not clumsy, just steady. Then they stopped. Silence. My throat was bone dry. I stared at the nylon ceiling and tried not to breathe too loudly. I don't know how long I lay there. Maybe a few minutes, maybe an hour. Eventually, the exhaustion took over, or maybe my mind simply shut down. Somehow, I fell asleep again. When I woke, it was gray morning. The first thing I saw was my pack. I always lean it against the tent at night. It was now sitting 3 feet away, upright, neat. The straps were buckled tight like someone had repacked it. And my water bottle, the one I always clipped to the side, was gone. Just gone. The ground around the tent looked undisturbed. No prints, no drag marks, nothing. I told myself an animal took it. A raccoon, maybe. Something clever enough to grab it, but polite enough to tidy my pack. That lie barely held together. I didn't linger. I threw everything into my bag, tightened the straps, and started walking. The forest gave me nothing back. No sound, no direction, no familiar landmarks. Every so often, I thought I heard something behind me, a twig snapping, leaves shifting. But when I turned around, it was always empty. By late afternoon, panic wasn't creeping anymore. It had settled in. It had weight now. My legs were heavy, my throat raw, my heart pounding like a drum I couldn't turn off. I wanted out more than I'd ever wanted anything. And then, through the trees, I saw it, a wooden shelter. It looked like the kind they build along the official trails, 3 walls, slanted roof, a small step up from the dirt. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. I stumbled toward it, climbed the short steps, ready to drop my pack and collapse. Then I saw it. Against the back wall, standing upright in the corner, was my water bottle. The same one that had disappeared from my pack during the night. It wasn't scratched. It wasn't dirty. It was just there, like someone had placed it carefully, waiting for me to find it. I didn't touch it. I didn't even go near it. I just backed away slowly out of the shelter and then turned. First, I walked. Then I walked faster. Then I ran. Branches tore at my sleeves, slapped against my face, ripped my pack. I didn't care. My lungs burned. I could hear something behind me again, the same footsteps as before. Not chasing, just following, matching my pace. When the trees finally began to thin, I saw a flash of silver through the branches, a road sign, metal, civilization. When my boots hit the asphalt, I nearly dropped to my knees. I stumbled forward, gasping, shaking, barely holding myself upright. A car came around the bend not long after. I waved like a madman, arms flailing, shouting for help. The driver slowed down, eyes wide, probably wondering what the hell I was doing out there. I climbed in without explaining a word. They drove me to the nearest ranger station. I tried to explain, to point out where it happened. But when we looked at the maps, nothing matched. No fork in the trail, no shelter anywhere near where I should have been. The area where I'd walked wasn't even marked as part of the trail system anymore. But the water bottle, that's what I keep thinking about. Someone moved it. Someone had been close enough to reach my camp, to lift my pack, to take it, and then to put it back, standing upright, like a message. I don't hike alone anymore. Sometimes, though, when I drive past the Blue Ridge and the trees lean close to the road, swear I can hear something faint. Footsteps pacing the shadows, keeping perfect time with the hum of my tires. I was 29 when it happened, and I'd planned the trip down to the smallest detail. It was supposed to be easy, an overnight hike up to Wright's Bluff in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a short trek, camp for one night, and be back at my car before lunch the next day. I'd done more difficult hikes before, and this one wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just time away from people, noise, and everything that kept my brain buzzing lately. I packed light. A one-man tent, a water filter, 2 freeze-dried meals, my knife, a map, a flashlight. and a backup battery for my phone. Everything in its place, everything under control. Nothing could go wrong. The trail started the way every good hike does. Quiet, steady, uneventful. By late afternoon, I'd already covered a few miles. I hadn't passed another hiker since early morning, but that didn't bother me. The solitude was part of the appeal. The woods were calm, almost too calm. The kind of stillness where even the air feels like it's holding its breath. The crunch of my boots on dry leaves was the only thing breaking the silence. Every few minutes, I'd glance at my watch. 5:09. 5:12 p.m. Perfect time to start thinking about where to camp. The map showed a small spur trail a little further ahead that supposedly led to an open clearing beside a stream. A perfect spot, according to the online hiking log I'd read weeks earlier. I walked another 10 minutes, expecting the turnoff any moment, but it didn't appear. I checked the map again, scanning for landmarks. The ridge that should have been to my right wasn't there. The ground sloped in the opposite direction. I walked another 20 minutes before I stopped. The trail had started to narrow, and I realized I hadn't seen a single marker in a while. It was just me, the trees, and the slow drop of light as the sun sank behind the ridges. My stomach tightened as I unfolded my map again. None of what I saw matched the lines on paper. There was no fork, no clearing, no ridge. I pulled out my phone. No signal, as expected, but the GPS didn't even load. The screen just spun, showing a lonely gray circle that refused to lock onto anything. I exhaled hard, told myself it was fine, that I'd backtrack to where I'd last seen a marker. I turned around and started walking back the way I came. That's when I noticed something strange. The trail didn't look right anymore. It was narrower now, like the forest had drawn closer in my absence. The trees felt denser, their trunks leaning inward. The roots underfoot seemed to tangle more than before, as though the ground itself had changed shape. My boots crunched on the leaves, but the sound felt muffled, swallowed by the air. The forest around me had gone still, completely still. It had to be the fading light, I told myself. The shadows made everything look different. That was all. Just shadows. I kept walking. Then I saw the stake. It jutted from the earth a few feet off the trail, rough, splintered wood, about waist high. I thought it might have been part of an old signpost, something left behind from a time when this path was better maintained. But when I got closer, I saw the marks. Deep gouges ran horizontally along the wood, at least a dozen, evenly spaced, too precise to be random damage. They looked carved. For some reason, I stared at it longer than I should have. My brain tried to rationalize it. Some camper marking days, a hunter's signal. But nothing felt right. There was a rhythm to those gouges that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to look away and kept moving. The air changed as I walked. It grew heavy, thick in my chest. Every breath felt harder to draw, like the oxygen had thinned. My footsteps made no sound now. The forest seemed to be holding itself still, waiting for something. Then the trees parted, and I saw a clearing ahead. Relief hit first. Maybe this was the spot from the map after all. I quickened my pace. But when I stepped into the clearing, that relief vanished like a switch had been flipped. The clearing was wrong. In the center stood a ring of stripped logs, sharpened to points at one end and driven into the ground like a fence. Inside that ring were bones, dozens of them. Skulls, ribs, long curved shapes, all stacked in neat, deliberate piles. I recognized deer at first glance, maybe a bear, but there were others that didn't fit. Broken, cracked, too large, too human-shaped. I froze where I stood, stomach twisting violently. It wasn't just the sight, it was the order of it all. Someone had done this intentionally, carefully. I backed away, forcing my body to move, though every instinct screamed to freeze. I didn't stop until I was back under the trees, the clearing vanishing from view. I turned and started walking fast, wanting only to put distance between myself and whatever I'd just seen. But the trail wasn't the same anymore. It curved the wrong way. The slope tilted where it shouldn't have. The trees didn't match what I remembered. The ground seemed softer, as though I were walking on something that wasn't quite solid. My chest tightened. My breathing turned shallow. I felt like I was dreaming, like the woods were quietly rearranging themselves each time I blinked. Then came the sound. Soft, behind me. Something moving through the leaves. Slow, careful. I stopped. The noise stopped. I told myself it was an animal, a deer, a raccoon, maybe even the wind. But when I turned around, there was someone standing in the middle of the trail. They were far at first, maybe 30 yards back. Perfectly still. I thought maybe it was another hiker. But the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin. Their head tilted at an angle that didn't look right, like it had been placed there rather than grown there. Their limbs hung loose and long, the outline of them wrong somehow, like a shadow pretending to be human. I couldn't move. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears. The figure didn't shift, didn't breathe. It just stood there. Finally, I forced myself to look away, eyes on the trail ahead. My walk turned into a power march. I didn't run, not yet. Prey runs. Prey gets chased. But every few seconds, I couldn't help but glance back. And every time, the figure was closer. It never moved, never stepped. But the distance between us kept shrinking. When it was maybe 20 yards away, I broke. I ran. My boots pounded the dirt. My pack slammed against my shoulders. Branches whipped across my face, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. My breath tore out of me in ragged gasps. All I could think was away. I don't know how long I ran before the realization hit me like a gut punch. The figure wasn't behind me anymore. It was ahead, standing in the middle of the path. Closer now. Its head was tilted again, studying me. It didn't chase, didn't reach. It just waited. I veered off the trail without thinking, crashing into the underbrush. The ground dropped unexpectedly, my knees slamming into roots as I half fell, half stumbled down a small ravine. I didn't care. I clawed my way up the other side, branches tearing at my jacket. My lungs felt like fire, my throat raw. The forest blurred around me, the world spinning in panic. I didn't stop until something else caught my eye. Another stake, taller than the last, covered in more gouges than I could count. And then another, and another. I turned in a slow circle, realizing I was surrounded. When I looked back toward the center of the grove, my blood turned to ice. I was back in the clearing, the same circle of logs, the same stacked bones. Only now, there was something new. My backpack. It sat neatly in the middle of the ring, upright, perfectly placed among the bones. I hadn't dropped it. I would have felt the weight leave my shoulders. But there it was, exactly like it had been set there on purpose. My vision swam. I took a step back, shaking my head as if that would undo what I was seeing. The air pressed down, thick and sour, like the world was holding its breath again. I didn't think. I just turned and ran. Branches whipped my face. My boots slipped in the soft soil. I didn't care where I was going, just away. The forest seemed endless. stretching in all directions, and no matter which way I turned, I felt like I was looping through the same trees, the same slope, the same shadows. But then, like a miracle, I saw gravel glinting through the trees. A road. I stumbled out of the woods, collapsing onto the shoulder, my legs giving out beneath me. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely breathe. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness. A car slowed, the driver leaning out the window. "You all right?" he called. I could barely form words. "Please, get me out of here." The rest of that night is a blur. I remember the hum of the car engine, the faint smell of coffee, the driver's nervous glances in my direction. Then the ranger station, warm lights, questions I couldn't answer. The next day, I tried to retrace my steps using the map. I couldn't find the trail. The ranger couldn't either. No one could. I checked my phone that afternoon, my mind still looping through flashes of the forest, the stakes, the bones, that shape on the trail. The last time I remembered looking at my watch was 5:12 p.m. When I finally dared to look at it again, it read 3:53 a.m. Almost 11 hours gone. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't even like driving through those mountains now. Sometimes, though, when I close my eyes, I swear I can still see that clearing, those sharpened logs, those bones, my pack sitting neatly among them, waiting for me to come back. I was about 3 hours into the hike when I realized how wrong the silence felt. Not just quiet, absent, no bird song, no whisper of wind through the trees, no distant chatter of squirrels or insects. Just the soft, rhythmic crunch of my boots on packed dirt and the faint creak of my backpack straps shifting with each step. At first, I brushed it off. The Blue Ridge Highlands had stretches like that, especially in early November when the air thinned and the wildlife retreated. I told myself it was just the season. The forest sleeps, I thought. That's what I came for anyway. To get away from the noise, from people, from the relentless static of the world. The plan was simple. One night out. Just me. Start at the east access point near Wilson Gap, follow the ridge up, camp by a small creek marked on the map, and be back at my car by late morning. Easy. I'd done plenty of short solo hikes before, and this one was supposed to be nothing more than a reset, a small reboot for my overworked brain. I packed light. One-man tent, sleeping bag, food for 2 meals, water filter, headlamp, and a paper map because I prided myself on not being that kind of hiker. My phone had an offline GPS app, battery at 86% when I left the car. I double-checked it twice before setting out, just to feel responsible. The morning had started beautifully. A clear, cold sky. The earthy scent of wet leaves, a steady climb that burned the right kind of ache into my legs. For hours, I walked under the canopy, listening to the muffled hush of wind high above. By mid-afternoon, I realized I hadn't seen another hiker since the first hour. That suited me fine. I came for solitude. The stillness didn't feel lonely. It felt deserved. I checked my watch as the trail began to narrow and twist. 4:46 p.m. I figured I had another half hour before I needed to find a place to camp. The creek was supposed to cut right across the ridge before looping north. It would have made a perfect spot. Except when I reached it, it wasn't much of a creek. Just a thread of dark water crawling between slick stones. The banks were too soft, the ground a patchwork of mud and roots. Not ideal for a tent. I crouched, pressing a boot into the soil. It sank half an inch with a faint suction sound. No way. My map showed another clearing about a mile farther up, so I decided to push on before the light died completely. That's when the woods started to change. The trail thinned to almost nothing, swallowed by undergrowth. The trees leaned closer, crowding out the last scraps of sky. The ground grew darker, the color of wet clay, though it hadn't rained in days. The air felt off, heavier somehow, like the world around me had stopped breathing. I told myself I was being dramatic. Trails changed, shadows played tricks when the sun dropped low. But still, the silence had grown so complete, it almost hummed. My own footsteps sounded too loud, like they didn't belong. 20 minutes later, I spotted a red blaze on a tree ahead, a small rectangle of faded paint nailed into the bark. Relief flickered in my chest. A marker meant I was still on track. Except, something about it bothered me. The nail holding it in was bent downward, almost twisted, like someone had driven it in wrong. The paint looked old, flaked and dull, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. I moved on, trying to shake the unease. 10 minutes later, the same tree appeared again. Same faded paint, same bent nail. I froze. My pack straps bit into my shoulders as I stared. It wasn't similar. It was the same tree. I'd been walking in a straight line, no forks, no loops. There was no logical way to circle back to it. But there it was. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up, cold and white. 5:19 p.m. The GPS app blinked, the blue dots spinning uselessly before freezing on a blank map. No service, of course. I flipped to the compass. The needle wobbled once, then froze, pointing northeast. Except when I turned, it didn't move. It was like the magnetism had died. A flicker of irritation flared in me, masking the fear for a second. Perfect time for the phone to glitch out. I shoved it back into my pocket and started walking faster. The trail began to slope downhill. That didn't register at first. I just followed it, grateful to see some kind of direction again. But after a few minutes, it hit me. The route was supposed to climb, not drop. I stopped, my breath loud in my ears. I was losing elevation, heading the wrong way entirely. Something was wrong. The silence pressed tighter now, a weight against my eardrums. I could hear my own heartbeat. I kept walking anyway, because what else could I do? 10 minutes later, the same tree appeared again. Same marker, same bent nail. My chest constricted like someone had cinched a belt around my ribs. I felt my pulse in my throat. The forest wasn't just still, it was wrong. I told myself I was tired, disoriented, that the Blue Ridge was full of old logging paths that twisted in circles. I said it out loud, trying to make it real. "You're fine. You just missed a turn." My voice sounded small and strange, like it didn't belong to me. I started half jogging now, my boots striking harder against the ground. The forest grew darker with each step. My headlamp beam danced across the trees, shadows jerking and snapping out of shape. Then, just when panic was about to boil over, I saw a break ahead. A clearing. I stumbled toward it, relief flooding my chest. The ground leveled out, open sky overhead. In the center, a fire ring. Stones blackened by old ash. It looked normal, real. I dropped my pack and crouched beside it, hands on my knees, breathing hard. For a second, I almost laughed. I'd found my spot. I'd made it. Then I saw the other pack. It sat directly across from the fire pit. Same make, same color, same model as mine, but older. The fabric was sun-bleached and frayed at the seams. It looked like it had been there for years. My first thought was relief again. Someone else had camped here once. Proof I wasn't completely lost. But the second thought hit like a knife. The straps on the pack were buckled neatly. The zippers closed. It wasn't abandoned. It had been placed. I stared for a long time before nudging it with my boot. was heavy. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave it alone, I crouched and unzipped it. Inside was a folded map. Same trail, same markings. But someone had drawn a red circle around the creek I'd passed earlier, the one I'd decided not to camp beside. Beneath the map was a watch. Its screen was cracked, but the numbers glowed faintly. 5:19, the exact time on my phone. I dropped the watch so fast it bounced off the stone edge of the fire ring. My stomach twisted, my hands numb. I fumbled to zip the bag shut, grabbed my own pack, and ran. No thought, no plan, just away. The trail ahead seemed to twist as I ran, narrower, darker, the trees closing in like walls. My breath tore out of me, the sound ragged and desperate. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Branches clawed at my sleeves, snagged my hair, scratched my face. My legs burned. My boots slipped on the uneven ground, and still I ran. Then, through the blur of movement, I saw something solid. A post. A sign. The trailhead marker. I sprinted toward it, like a drowning man clawing for the surface. The trees broke open, and suddenly the gravel crunched under my feet. My car sat right where I'd left it, quiet and dusted with leaves. The sight nearly broke me. I threw my pack in the back seat, climbed in, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, the dashboard lights flickering on. The clock glowed, 5:19 p.m. I stared at it, hands trembling. Then I slammed the gear shift into reverse and tore down the gravel road. I didn't stop until the first bars of cell signal appeared at the top of my screen. The time blinked once, then jumped forward. 8:46 p.m. 3 hours had disappeared. When I reached the highway, I pulled over, chest heaving, and stared into the dark forest I'd just escaped. The silence was still there, heavy, watching. I haven't gone back since. Sometimes, when I drive near the Blue Ridge and the trees crowd close to the road, I catch glimpses of something red nailed to the trunks in my headlights. Bent nails, faded paint, always the same. And when I check the clock, it's always the same time, 5:19.